Hey, everybody, welcome back to a new episode of the Hemmings Hot Rod BBQ. On this episode, we've got Ben McCloy of Jack Dick Customs in Martinez, California. Now, I've known Ben for a number of years, and Ben is one of those guys who makes the creations that everybody wants to see, but no one ever thought about. He made a supercar hauler out of a LaFrance fire truck. He made a pizza oven for a restaurant out of another fire truck. He's got an old Hudson and a Pontiac behind him, along with a whole bunch of other stuff that has gone through his shop in years. So, Ben, how you doing, man?
I'm good. How you doing?
Very, very well, dude. So tell us, your shop, Jack Dick Customs, like I mentioned, Martinez, California. How did you first get into building hot rods? Because I know you weren't always you started out as a technician working on BMWs and stuff, right?
You're correct. Yeah, I started out as a BMW technician when I was in my 20s, just grunting away working on cars. A buddy of mine and I built this car right here in his driveway. After we had built the car, people kind of gravitated towards the car, and they wanted us to build things for them. So we opened the shop.
So with the Hudson, now everybody right now, if you're listening to this, do us a favor and go to the YouTube channel, the Hot Rod BBQ YouTube channel, and check it out, because we're gonna have some good visuals in this episode. Now, the car behind Ben is the Hudson that he built. Now it looks like a Hudson from the front, but it is a true Woody. How did you get into building a Woody when I know Hudson never made a Woody? How did that come about?
I bought this car on Craigslist for $900. When I bought the car, it had no doors, no sides on it. Finding Hudson parts were impossible 10 years ago when I built this car. So I had the idea that maybe instead of trying to find the metal pieces or fabricate metal pieces, why not do a Woody? Why not do a half Woody? Yeah. So my friend and I went down to Home Depot, and we picked up a bunch of mahogany and some wood paneling, and we used this jacuzzi and sheer force of will and gravity and buckets of water to shape some wood pieces to get the curves around the door edges and things like that. The roof line, those were all made with buckets of water and heat and the sun. I mean, just wanted to build something different.
That's a big project to take on for an initial hot rod build. And the fact that at that point you didn't have because that car was the first time I met you, and I walked through a car show and I saw a whole bunch of normal stuff, and then the Hudson was there, and I was like, all right, who made this thing? And there are so many different little pieces and nuances in that car that I've never seen before, and it really struck me. And the same it can be said about the Pontiac behind you. So after you built the Hudson, was that the catalyst? Like, did people start coming up to you and say, holy cow, this is kind of a trick piece? Like, who did this?
Yeah, exactly like what happened with you. I had a bunch of people come up to me at car shows and say, hey, who are you? What do you do? Why do you, can you make me one? Can I buy yours? Things like that. Well, you can't buy mine, but I could make you something for sure. We built this whole thing in 3 months in my friend's driveway, because there's a show every year in Santa Cruz on the wharf called Woody's on the Wharf. And I started this and wanted to be able to bring the car to the car show. So there was this fevered pitch of building this car from the ground up. Obviously it looks little details have changed over the years, but the bare bones of the car were made. And I got on the freeway and drove the thing all the way down there to Santa Cruz from Martinez, it's a 2-hour drive.
Holy cow. Okay. So when that happened, I mean, the name of the shop is Jack Dick Customs. How did the name of the shop come around? Because, like, just from a marketing perspective, I think it's brilliant. So how did that come about?
Well, we had, when we were building the car in my friend's driveway, there was an old shop teacher lived around the corner. He'd come by every day, wood shop teacher. He'd come by every day, look at what we were doing, and just shake his head. You guys don't know Jack Dick. And then he'd walk his dog and let it shit on the yard, poop on the yard, and then leave. Sorry about that. He did that every day. So when we were done with this car, I got so used to hearing him say that I just owned it. It's on my logo. We don't know Jack Dick, and no one can ever accuse me of knowing too much.
Right. Well done. Way to skirt the issue. That's great.
Yeah. Not my fault.
So you built right there. So you've built some pretty amazing things over the years, and one of which was actually featured at the Quail Lodge during Pebble Beach Car Week, which was pretty amazing. And it was a fire. And I mean, I had featured it years ago on a show, but I mean, it's a car hauler that you made out of a fire truck. So how did that come? I mean, how did that come about? Because you're like, let me find the biggest thing. And I want to preface this by saying, when somebody goes to Ben and says, "Hey Ben, I'm looking for this. I'm looking for a car trailer," Ben will take it to that next level and be like, "Well, I could probably do that out of a space shuttle or something like that." And then all of a sudden something appears and it's the most amazing thing in the world. So how did the super hauler come out, the fire truck? How did that happen?
The LaFrance fire truck actually started. I had built a cab over years and years ago. I called it the Green Monster. It was an old white 3000 cab over that I'd built a pickup truck behind it. Decided to sell the truck. Got contacted by a guy who wanted me to convert it into a car hauler because he liked the front of the truck. And I got to thinking and decided, you need something with some power, some torque, some girth, size.
Yeah,
This thing,
sure.
massive. You want to throw a car on the back of it. Otherwise, it looks like, everyone makes a car hauler. Then you got the tiny cab up front and then this wide bed on the back. So we started looking around and we found this old retired fire truck that maybe had 5,000 miles on it, a 72 American LaFrance. And he purchased the fire truck, brought it down here, and I completely gutted the fire truck front to back and just built a bed on the back of it that could transport cars, switched around the interior, moved the bulkhead back, the firewall moved, boxed in the engine. It just really became a thing of its own.
So is that daunting when you figure out, because conceptually you're like, a fire truck makes the perfect vehicle, but when you get it, it's still a fire truck. So like you have to start pulling stuff apart. How daunting is that? Do you see that as a massive undertaking, or do you look at it as it's just nut and bolts and I'll just take it apart?
It can get extremely overwhelming, but I had someone tell me once, the only way to eat a whale is one bite at a time. So I have to approach the projects just like that. If I look at it and say, try to figure out how I'm going to put everything together in that moment, I can get lost in the weeds real easy. So you start taking things apart and thinking, and I do a lot of doodling and things like that, just kind of trying to get my mind around the steps that I'm going to have to take in order to pull this thing apart and then put it back together and use a lot of the systems that are still in this vehicle.
So do you enjoy, I mean, I know as somebody who does hot rods and trucks and things like that, there's a lot of fabrication. There's a lot of welding and stuff like that. Is that something that you enjoy? Is that like, do you enjoy the artistic part of that? Or do you enjoy the actual kind of melding of metal type of thing, or just the whole thing in general?
Well, I feel like I'm very artistic, but I can't draw and I can't paint. So all I can do is move metal around. So my doodles look like, something your mom would hang on your refrigerator when you're in third grade. I've got little stick figures and it says me, and then
right.
The vague outline of what a vehicle might look like. My artistic expression comes through the use of my hands, trying to incorporate other ideas into the project while I'm doing it. The fire truck went through many stages of the car hauler. The super hauler went through many stages of what it was going to look like from concept to actuality. The customer had a couple concept drawings built, and I tweaked some things, added some stripes on the fender to give it a 50s look, and we took that 70s looking fire truck and made it a 50s looking locomotive, if you will.
Yeah, very Art Deco, very, very cool piece. And I'm going to reiterate this. If you're listening to this, go to the video on YouTube and watch it, because we're going to put some great images up. So now let's walk over to the pizza oven. Was the pizza oven fire truck a direct result of the super hauler? How did that come about?
I get a lot of odd requests here. And I got contacted by the owner of a restaurant in Orinda, the Fourth Bore. He wanted to build he had a fire truck, a 67 Ford pump truck, fire truck. And he wanted to make it so he could take it to an event, cater, but then also have something that kind of stood out. So we went through a couple, you know, again with that, he brought it here and I started disassembling the thing with a plasma torch because those tanks are ungodly heavy. So, you know, taking this car apart, you know, 3 feet at a time, I ended up hollowing out the center of it, dropping a pizza oven that came from a restaurant. So this thing's a good 3,000 pounds. Building support braces in the center of the truck, putting the oven in there, and then putting the old cladding back up the side so you couldn't tell that oven was stuffed in there.
Yeah.
Cutting a little pocket window so you can shove the pizza through there, and the pizza oven opening so you could shove the pizza through there. And then building out, I had opened up the back of it, and then we had a restaurant company build a refrigeration box, and then I ran electrical and things like that so that it had a cold box you could store the dough in. There was the pizza oven, and then I built him a hinged barbecue off the back that could swing away so they could, you know, cook chicken, barbecue, have beer. There's beer taps on the other side of the truck. I mean, we just kept throwing stuff on this truck to where it just became a thing of its own.
So does that, when a customer comes to you with an idea like that, how do you manage the expectation? Because I'm sure customers have an idea of what they want, but then as you're going through the build process, will you say, you know what, we can also do this or this, or a lot of times are you kind of subtracting stuff? Like if the customer has this grand vision, you're like, wait, there's only so much we can do. Is it, which way do you generally go?
A little of both. Like with for example, the fire truck with the pizza oven in the back of it. You know, I don't only work on fire trucks, by the way.
I know. We're going to get into that. We're going to get into other stuff very soon.
Yeah, with the fire truck, he wanted an ice cream machine on that thing. He wanted, I don't know, cotton candy, a clown that jumped out of the front, some extra, you know. So we had a couple things that we had to tailor back because we're limited in size and weight. So, but then with the beer taps, you know, throwing those where the old gauges were, that was kind of I was taking handles off, and I go, you know, this would be a great place for some beer taps. And then that transitioned into having beer taps on this side of the truck, and then a generator underneath so that we could run it on shore power generator or the batteries. You know, it just kind of evolves as I go. Managing expectations. You tell me everything you want and I'll do the best I can to make it happen is kind of how I approach things.
Gotcha. Okay, so now let's pivot and jump into cars, because you've built some amazing hot rods over the years. How are most of what you do, are they restorations? It's simple mechanics? Is it, you know, bringing cars into the 20th century via technology? What do most of your customers come in and look for? Or a lot of times, do they bring in cars that have already gone, that are just tired and old and like, I need this to work right?
I do all levels of restoration here, except for paint and body. So I'll get cars that come in here with that are completely painted and ready to be assembled. I get cars that are, you know, pre-paint, that they want some light fabrication work done to it. I like a car with a carburetor, so I don't do a lot of LS swaps and that kind of stuff here. I do more. I try to tell my customers the car was someone's daily driver for 20, 30 years. So why not keep it the way it is and use it the way it is? I've put plenty of like fuel injection bolt-on systems in cars and done modular motor swaps and LS swaps and things like that. But I tend to stay towards keeping old cars the way they were, or with little upgrades, and then just keeping them on the road. So a lot of my customers, I just manage their hobby, their project, and they just want to drive the car on the weekend or, you know, wherever. So that's kind of what.
Well, I mean, if you follow the internet, right, you would believe that every single car out there has to be LS swapped, and, you know, everything needs fuel injection and everything else. But there is still a massive contingent of people out there that are like, no, I like my carburetor. And listen, I've got both, right? I've got one car that's getting a new motor, EFI, but like my old 68 Charger, that's staying carbureted. And so I think there are people that truly like that. They like the simplicity of it. They like the ease of use of it. They like the lack of electronics. Do you find that people kind of look at the internet and they see all this stuff, this technology, and they're like, oh, that's the way that I have to go? And do you find yourself sometimes talking to them and be like, guy, you don't have to do this? you can keep it simple and keep it normal, and it'll still drive beautifully.
That's absolutely what I do often. People do get, they pick up a magazine and they read about all the new fancy things that they can put on their car, bolt-ons, and they want to put those on their car. And I a lot of times find myself having to manage the expectations of the customer. What do you want the car to do? What are you expecting out of this $1,200 unit if you put it on your car? A lot of times what they're expecting it to do, maybe you can do that just fine, with a decently built carburetor, or
Sure.
Keeping the engine stock. I've got a 68 Torino that I drive all over the world, and it's 4-barrel Holley carburetor, and I put 7 people in the thing and drive to the ocean. There's no limit if you don't limit yourself.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, like, I know my Charger that's had 70,000 miles on it with a 440 with a carb on it, and it runs great. There's no reason to change it, I think. And I think we get to a point from a technological perspective that people just feel that they need to overcomplicate things, and sometimes they don't. And that's not taken away. There's some amazing products out there that help you achieve different levels of automotive restoration, right? And what you want. But the original stuff still works pretty damn good. Still works pretty damn good.
Yeah, like I said, it was somebody's daily driver the entirety of their use of the car. So trying to make it a daily driver by changing everything that made it a daily driver doesn't make a lot of sense. Barring giving it maybe an extra gear on the freeway, those kind of upgrades make a lot of sense. But trying to change the beast and make it breathe different, I just I'll do for somebody wants, but it's not really that's not something that I push my customers to do.
Gotcha. So let me ask you this: do you get, from a perspective of age wise, what is the age bracket that comes in? Do you get guys that are, men and women that are in their 20s and their 30s that come in, and are they interested in hot rodding? Are you seeing that? Are you seeing like the younger generation kind of looking at these old metal cars and going, this is really cool, I'm digging this? Do you get that demographic?
Most of my demographic, I would say 30 to 70 years old. I do have a couple younger kids that'll come through here from time to time. I've got one guy in particular. He's got a 1940 Ford 4-door. It's green. They call it the Sergeant, with the Chevron tail light. He drives around town with the Ford fedora on and delivers Uber Eats in his 1940 Ford. So California roads are beautiful. I mean, you can't even drive down a road and keep your teeth in your head. So I'm constantly fixing parts of the suspension on that car because he's driving the snot out of it to deliver Uber Eats for whatever reason. People really enjoy seeing this car pull up in the driveway. He brings them their food and he gets great tips because of it.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting fact. I mean, we go back to kind of the daily driver portion of this thing, and to be able to take a car that's going on 80 years old now, and you don't really think about that, but it is, and using it as a driver. And I mean, the Pontiac behind you, I mean, that still has a straight 6 carburetor, right? And I mean, I've seen that car personally go. Kind of, but yeah.
I did that. I took the flat 6 out of that thing, and I put in a 292 out of a 67 Chevy truck, but then painted it all green and made it look old. Mm-hmm. Just because I wanted more horsepower. That thing had 35 horsepower from the factory. So the 292 gave me, well over 200 horsepower. And I've driven that thing all the way to Reno and back. I've driven it to Santa Barbara and back. I mean, 6-7 hours in the car. And it just totes down the freeway. Actually gets decent gas mileage because it's a single barrel carburetor. I can get 20, 25 miles to the gallon if I keep it under 90 on that car. Just, which is hard, but it can be done.
So so we got the mechanics down and kind of some of the visuals and stuff. Do you also do I know you do, but how did you get into interior stuff? Is that you have a very, very, you have your own aesthetic, and that aesthetic gets better every time I see another car that you do. But it's interesting, like the coupe behind you, you changed the interior, but you've made it look so period correct. Is that something when you see a car, do you look at a car that comes in or something like that, and do you think of a theme for it? Or, and do you, if a customer says, Ben, I want the interior done, will you tell them, I think we should go this way? Or, do they generally want to keep stuff stock?
A lot of people have their own ideas on what they want done, and interior is kind of like clothing, right? So some people just have a style that they really enjoy. My style, if I could dress like I was in the 20s, I'd do that all the time. When it comes to interiors with like cars of my own, the personality of the outside of the car kind of has to be mirrored on the inside of the car. This car has a lot of wood, metal, things like that on the inside. This one, I made the interior softer because the outside of the car stayed stock, except for not having paint on it. So the interior, I'd use muted browns and dark tans and colors like that to kind of keep that mohair look on the inside of the car. But then, with the materials that I could get at a fabric store to make door panels, so a lot of tweeds and things like that made sense.
Gotcha. For everybody wondering what that big whistle is in the background, Ben lives right by a train station, so that's an Amtrak train go by
in front of the state. Yeah, it's gonna come right through the shop any minute now, I'm sure.
So are there cars like, are you seeing any transitions right now? And what I mean by that are, you've got the 30s, 40s, 50s, all, muscle cars and stuff like that. Are you starting to get requests for late model stuff for late 70s, early 80s, 90s stuff? Are you seeing any transition in the hobby for that?
I do see quite a bit of that. And I don't work on anything that's a smog car. And I only do pre-smog car, but I'm starting to get different, inquiries about, late 70s Jeeps and things like that. Mm-hmm. Problem with California is if you alter any part of the powertrain on a car that's out within a smog range, I kind of become liable for that, the modification. Customers liable for the modification. So it's just better not even to get into that, which is unfortunate because we could make a 70s Wagoneer run far better than it ever did from the factory. Mm-hmm. If California would just kind of pull their head out of their ass and say, yeah, you're going to make that thing basically close to running water out of the tailpipes versus a cloud of smoke, but they just can't find their way to allow that on older cars. So it just kind of get into those cars at all for me.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, we look at it, and for those out there that are listening that aren't in California, anything post 75 has to be smogged. And basically that means you have to have all the original factory equipment, from the vacuum hoses to the air pump to the catalytic converters to all that stuff. If it started out with a carburetor, it has to have a carburetor on it. There are a couple of systems that you can retrofit, but the cost of doing so, it really becomes astronomical. And it's interesting because as somebody kind of who grew up in the late 70s and the 80s and the 90s, I still don't think of 70s cars as that old. Well, 70s cars are 50. 70s cars are 50. And I know that because I'm 50. So it's one of those things where you go, I don't know, in our minds, we just I don't think of things like when I think of an 80 Trans Am or an 80, like a Smokey and the Bandit Trans Am, I'm like, it's like 20 years old. It's like, no, Mike, it's like 40 plus years old. It's old. But you, as a hot rodder, it's also difficult because you want to get that performance out of it. And the state of California just fights you tooth and nail at every step. And that's regardless of what you could prove from an efficiency standpoint, from an environmental standpoint. It drives me crazy out here, man.
Yeah, it's way off. I mean, if I were to take the Trans Am you were talking about, and I put an LS motor in it in California, let's call it a 1980 Trans Am, and I put an LS motor, it's running way more efficiently with the catalytic converter. Well, if I go to California and try to register that car, they say, well, now you need to go to a referee, and that referee is going to look at the car and say, now you have to have every piece of equipment that was installed in the donor car. So if it came out of a 2002 Corvette, I have got to have all of the evap systems, the fuel tank, the monitoring systems, all that's got to be in and functional. And then I still have to go to this referee every time to smog the car. So it just doesn't make sense, which is unfortunate because these cars could all be, I know everyone's conscious about what's going on with the environment. So you look at these cars and you could make these cars so much better and not be wasting putting these cars into a junkyard, you could be updating the systems to something more, something newer, and really be keeping some of these really cool cars on the road a lot longer if they'd let us.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. All right, I want to throw a question out there to you that I don't know if you've been asked before. So the metal work that you do is pretty fantastic. The ideas that run around in your head are more fantastic. Have you ever thought about going a different route? Not with cars per se, but like creating your own different sculptures and stuff like that? Because I've seen, so for those that don't know, Ben's got some things around the shop that he's just made. And he's got a little robot guy. He's got a couple of little things. And I look at them and I go, well, how the hell did that come about? And he's like, I just made it. Like there are doors in his shop that you look at and you're like, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen. Where did you buy that? He's like, nah, I just thought of it. I just made it. Like, would you ever get into that side of stuff, like that creative, that sculpture side of stuff? And because my God, dude, you've got an eye that so many people just do not have. And I've always wondered if that's something you thought about.
With at risk of insulting everybody, if I had more a cocaine habit, I might be an artist. I get a lot of leftover stuff that I'll assemble. My mom said I should make more friends, so I make these robot things all the time, so I have friends, making friends. Just camshafts on door handles and things like that. That just things that I see things and I want to do something different than what it was intended for. And I like gears and cogs and the look of, rusted metal. So, a lot of that kind of went into this. I had a whole bunch of pieces on this car that I just picked up for like gardening tools or whatever else that I could get my hands on, that I stuck on this car to be a part of it. Obviously the grill is off of a tractor,
right?
That's an International Harvester grill surround. And I just jamming a bunch of things together and making them make sense is kind of fun for me.
Right. So what's next on the list? Is there a vehicle that you've always wanted to do, or do you have a favorite vehicle that you're like, one day I want to build this, not for a customer, but for myself?
I've got a shorty Metro van in the yard, 1950s. That's going to be my next project. I'm friends with a guy up in Reno, owns Super Glow Auto Body, and he built one of the first 50s S10 swapped Metros. He drags that thing, patinaed out everywhere. He's driven it, Oregon to San Diego and everywhere in between. Bread vans are really cool. I've got one sitting in the yard. It's a shorty. It looks like a watermelon. It's actually red. It's just like an odd little duck, but I'd enjoy, dragging that thing around too. I want to put that thing together.
Right. Yeah. And they're really, really cool. I mean, I know, Jeff's van. I know Rutledge Wood is a huge fan of those things.
Yep.
Yeah, and they're useful. That's what the other part of people don't understand. Like, you can turn those into all sorts of like camper vans and off-road. Like, there's so much stuff that you can do with these things. And I love the fact that people are finally starting to look at these vehicles and think to themselves, I can repurpose this. I can make it into something that is completely uncommon, something that will inspire people to do stuff. And I just think that's wild.
Ben and Jeff's van, when we were up in Reno or Redding for cool April nights, and we had people jammed in that thing like sardines in a can. I had like 12 people in there, and it was just putting down the freeway with its S10 V6 in there, and it had no problems with it at all. Air suspension, so we just bumped it up for all the passengers. But yeah, I mean, you can do that. You could flatten out the floor. I actually built one for a customer, and he was going to put a fold out TV and take it tailgating, so that TV popped out of the back of the truck. Yeah, I mean, the sky's the limit when it comes to those old tall bread vans.
Very cool. All right, so I got one final question. Do you see, we touched on the younger generation, but do you see kids that are, say, I don't know, 15, 16, 18 years old, wanting to get into kind of old school hot rods? Do you see there's an interest there, or are you finding it's difficult to get them interested?
I think that they're interested, but we don't hear about that yet. And the reason I say that is, I've got a teenager myself, a teenage boy, and I look at what he's into, and in this generation that's coming up really loves video games. We had our Nintendos and Ataris, and they've got their PlayStations and boxes. Some of the more popular games, besides the Fortnite type games and stuff like that, you get into like Grand Theft Auto, and you don't drive around Lamborghinis per se as much in those as you're getting into old Chargers and Challengers, and there's a lot of games that are using old body cars or concepts of old body cars where they're taking ideas like I have, and they're making them on these video games. So these kids see these, like when I drive the wagon down the road, they see the Camaros, they see things like this, and they're like, oh yeah, that's from Grand Theft Auto. I want one of those, So there's an excitement there that that's unrealized at this point.
That's a cool take. I never even thought about that, but that's a very, very cool take on it, because I never thought a video game would be a kid's first introduction to a hot rod, where for us, it was obviously magazines and car shows. But I mean, that's cool. That's actually really cool. Yeah,
my son told me the other day he knew how to change a tire because he played Grand Theft Auto. I go, you don't know how to change a tire. Let me show you how to change a tire. He goes, oh, no. I just click this button and then I get the jack. And then I'm like, that's not how any of this works. No, you can't stand there and just push your phone and a jack itself up, or you can with the right tool. But those video games implement certain aspects of building cars and things like that. So, it's easy to dismiss those out of hand, those video games, for us, because we think of them a waste of time. But there's a lot of things that I see, my own son going through, and he's understanding, a tire doesn't just reinflate itself. You have to change it. Things like that navel gazing generation might not understand otherwise.
Right. Oh, that's very, that's a very cool point. Not something that I realized, but yeah, man, it makes sense. It makes total sense. So Ben, we're coming up on almost an hour. So dude, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, man. This has been rad.
When you're having flies, right?
It always does, dude. It's great. It's great. I got the same watch. That's amazing. Target. Yeah.
It's on sale.
So, dude, thank you for coming on the podcast. Anybody out there, if you are in the Northern California area or anywhere in the country, and you want something ridiculously amazing built, call Ben. Jack Dick Customs, Martinez, California. If you're looking for a project, obviously check out the Hemmings Classifieds. You've got 25,000 cars online at any given time, plus a really kick-ass auction. So yeah, otherwise that's it.
You can find us at Jack Dick Customs on Facebook, or at Don't Know Jack on Instagram. We have a website, jackdickcustoms.com, and obviously, if you just Google Jack Dick Customs, you can see images of the cars that we've built. Like and subscribe.
Yes, like and subscribe. So Benjamin, thank you, brother, and dude, we'll talk to you very soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks for listening, folks. And again, please subscribe to the Hot Rod BBQ podcast. If you're on Spotify, check us out there. Subscribe to it on iTunes. And if you are going to go to YouTube, make sure you go to the Hot Rod BBQ podcast and hit that subscribe button, and we'll come to you every week.